Hello, everyone, and happy Monday. Welcome to the next session of our student organization Zoom series. Just as a heads up, we are recording this, so if you do not want to be seen or heard, please make sure that your camera is off and that you are muted. We'll get started in just a second. Awesome. Well, my name is Jackie Phillips, and I serve as the Senior Coordinator for Student Engagement in the Department of Engagement, Leadership, and Service. I work directly with student organizations, and I'm so excited that y'all are all joining us today to learn a little bit more about utilizing Zoom for student organization operations. I'm also joined by Taylor Kane, the Director of ELS, and I'll have her introduce herself.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming and joining us. Many of you, I'm already seeing a couple of familiar names and faces that have joined us in previous Zoom series so far. So thank y'all so much for joining in for another one. As always, we'll record this and post it on our website later this week so that if folks weren't able to join, they can do so. As always, as we go through, and Jackie's going to present this one for the most part, if you have questions as we go, please feel free to throw them in the chat box, and I'll help kind of moderate and ask those questions. And some of them we may save towards the end if they're not necessarily specific to the content we're going over at that time. So please feel free to engage and ask questions. We want to be as helpful and resourceful for you and your organizations as we can. So without further ado, I'll pass it back over to Jackie to get us started.
Thanks, Taylor. And our hope today is to share some information, but then also through sharing my screen, show you on the actual UGA Zoom platform how to do different things. So if something comes to mind that I don't necessarily mention, feel free to send that in the chat as Taylor mentioned before. And I'd be happy to either show you or do some digging later and then follow back up with you. But utilizing Zoom, so UGA does have a partnership with Zoom in which all faculty, staff, and students do have a free account. And so you can find that at uga.zoom.us. And by logging in with your MyID and using UGA, your UGA Zoom account, you actually can have up to 300 participants in a meeting or event or any Zoom session. And then there's also no time limit. So if you're using the free account just via the normal Zoom website, there is a 40-minute time limit and you're only allowed a certain number of people. And so definitely make sure you're logging in through the UGA platform so that there is no time limit and that you're allowed to have more participants. And I oftentimes just Google UGA Zoom and it comes right up to log in. So Zoom can be really helpful for meetings, if you're sharing information or discussing things. So anything from a general body meeting, but then also executive board meetings, one-on-one meetings, trainings, workshops. But I also recognize that we're all starting to get a little zoomed out, as one of my colleagues said earlier. And so recognizing that of finding different ways to still engage with one another through Zoom, and to really make it fun and interactive so that it's not just having a conversation or talking at one another through a screen. And so some other ideas of things that you can do via Zoom include for recruitment, creating a Zoom meet and greet room. So having opportunities for individuals to drop in, chat with you. You can do breakout rooms, so splitting attendees into smaller groups if it is a larger group, so that individuals can build more one-on-one or smaller connections or more intentional connections. And then also utilizing Zoom for elections. So coordinating times for speeches, offering time for question and answer, and then also utilizing forms and inserting links for voting. So Zoom can be used for all of that in addition to meetings. I'm also thinking about adapting other activities or programs you've done in the past. So engaging with the UGA community. So discussion panels, virtual service opportunities, trivia nights, really thinking about what events and programs have you held in the past and how can that be adapted to Zoom for a way to continue building connections across the UGA community and within your student organization specifically. It's also great for just hanging out with members. So playing online games, sharing screens, watching a movie together, keeping the chat going. So finding different ways to just get to know one another and have a relaxing time after a day of classes and other responsibilities. So how exactly can you do that? So when meeting on Zoom or planning an activity or event being hosted online through Zoom, make sure you're testing your technology beforehand. So making sure that if you are the one hosting it and you're the one doing it, that you know how to utilize it. So if you're going to be using breakout rooms, maybe asking another executive board member to join you on Zoom a few minutes beforehand and test that out to make sure that you know how to work it. Or if you need to look it up quickly, making sure that you know how to do whatever it is that you're trying to do so that the meeting does run as smoothly as possible, or the event is. If you are meeting, creating an agenda and ensuring minutes are taken similar to how you would in person. So that way everyone can follow along and really know what you're planning on doing and whether or not they should have their camera on if there's going to be an activity, or really just so that they know what to expect. Screen sharing is a really helpful tool. So if similar to this, if you're sharing out information, or if you normally would have a PowerPoint going during a meeting, share your screen so that people can continue to stay engaged and see what's going on, so that they're not just hearing it, but that they can also, for our more visual learners, being able to see it as well. And then it's a great way to be able to reference it later on as well. Creating a guide to assist members with navigating Zoom. The Student Government Association did a really good example. They created one this past spring for their Senate meetings. And so while that is more of a formalized meeting, they were able to outline how they were going to use Zoom during that meeting to really show members, here's some of the features you need to know ahead of time, and included screenshots in that. And when I go online to show you the actual Zoom platform in just a little bit, I'll be sure to go through that guide so that y'all can see an example of that too. So some of the ways to engage participants via Zoom is create fun Zoom backgrounds for members to use. So maybe having a competition within the organization for who can come up with one, having everyone create their own Zoom backgrounds, using that as an icebreaker. That's a great way to just have some fun and get goofy with it. Utilizing nonverbal feedback. So Zoom does have the option for participants to click yes, no, go faster, and some other commands to let the person presenting know how it's going, or if they have a question, raising hand. And so making sure to enable this so that participants can share some of that feedback without necessarily interrupting the meeting or having to put it in the chat. And this allows them to just indicate it next to their name. Reactions, same thing. Participants are able to do a thumbs up and an applause. So this is a fun way if someone says something, as we normally would clap in person, instead of having to unmute themselves and start clapping, they can put the icon so that that shows up and everyone can see it. And so this is something, both nonverbal feedback and reactions, that's really helpful to make sure is enabled when you're setting up your Zoom meeting. You can also do polling within Zoom. So this allows you to create polls that will be sent out and allow people to vote or share their opinions on things throughout your meeting. I think this is really cool because it's then embedded within the actual platform, and you're not having to send a Google form or Qualtrics form for just a quick vote or trying to gauge what people think real quickly. Zoom also has annotations, and so this is really cool that if someone is sharing their screen, they can annotate it, or you can have participants. So I have seen different icebreakers being done, so where individuals can draw, and so this is just something that has to be enabled when you're creating the meeting so that folks can then draw on it if you're doing an icebreaker with different things and want them to put their initials, or you can get creative with it and do different like Pictionary or like different games with it as well. Also encouraging participants to rename themselves. So if you're wanting everyone to indicate what their position is within the organization, or share any additional information, this is a great way to encourage them to rename themselves to whatever name they'd like to be called. And then you can also encourage members to update their profile picture within their profile. So this way that if they don't have their screen on, that you can at least still see a profile picture image of them, so it's not just showing up as their name. And see, I just did annotation and a good example of practicing beforehand. I can't find my mouse. If you'll give me 1 second, sorry about that. Hey Taylor, as a co-host, are you able to close the annotation? My computer has freezed.
Bear with us, y'all. This is what happens when you're still trying to figure out how to use Zoom. Let's see. I'm gonna stop your sharing and now you try to reshare. Let's see if it'll work.
Perfect. I think this is a great example of how testing things beforehand can be incredibly helpful. Thanks, Taylor.
Well, and here's the thing, you're gonna screw this up from time to time, just like we are. Just have folks bear with you and you'll get it figured out. Thanks for your patience, y'all.
Yes, thank you very much. So when scheduling meetings on Zoom, Zoom allows you to create reoccurring meetings and activities when you first create the event. And so this is really helpful if you know your general body meetings or executive board meetings or a specific event are going to occur more than just one time. And this allows the same link to be used for each of those. So you can go ahead and schedule them all at the beginning of the semester. And then you can always go in and edit that if you end up needing to change the time for one specific meeting, or if you need to add more, it allows you to do that all within the same creation of an event or meeting so that you're not having to have different links all over the place. You can also enable join before host. So if this is going to be a one-on-one meeting or a smaller group meeting, and maybe you know you're going to be coming straight from class and hopping on Zoom, or might be having something else go on, this enables participants to join before you, and then you'll also receive an email if you set it up saying so-and-so is waiting for you in Zoom. And so that's a great way if it's something where people can casually start talking before everyone's there. That's a great way to allow them to immediately join the meeting once clicking on the link. There's also co-host versus alternative host. So a co-host is someone that ends up being given all the same permissions as you. And so this is if you need help sharing your screen, or maybe you want help moderating the chat. Adding someone as a co-host gives them all of those same privileges and same access from Zoom. An alternative host is someone that is added as a host before the meeting that then can log in and have host privileges if you're not able to attend, or if you're setting up the meetings on behalf of the organization or different committees that you may not necessarily have to be there for. And so, for example, today, Taylor was added as an alternative host, so she's able to do all of the same things, such as stopping my screen sharing that I am able to do as a host as well. You can also enable waiting rooms. So this is what you saw when you first joined today's session. And so with a waiting room, you can customize the description. So if you want to say like, welcome to our first meeting of the semester, or any additional information that might be helpful for people. And then as folks are waiting in the waiting room, you can also send them messages. So if you're running a little bit behind, say you're holding interviews via Zoom and people are in the waiting room, you can say, hey, we'll be with you in just a minute. So that's an easy way to chat with them, but also not have everyone immediately join you within the Zoom call. And so waiting rooms are incredibly helpful for larger groups. So if there's going to be more of a presentation style, or if you're having interviews and send out the same link to everyone, this way someone can't join until you're ready for them. There's also a new feature on the involvement network where you can add an online event. And so this is great for including Zoom links or other links. And so if you are creating events or planning to host them on Zoom, you can include that on the involvement network for people to click and directly be brought to your Zoom meeting. So some safety considerations to think about. You are able to enable a passcode. And so a passcode can be used if you don't necessarily want anyone just finding your Zoom meeting by accident, or maybe you're having a performance, or you're going to be live streaming it. And so this is a great way that only those with the specific passcode can then join your meeting. Similarly, registration is another safety feature that Zoom now offers. And so this allows you to set it up where people have to register and provide their email beforehand in order to get the link. And so this way, when you're posting the link on social media or sharing it out to folks through email, you don't risk anyone random joining because they had to have gone through and registered beforehand. And then you can also see who all registered. And if there's anyone that's really not supposed to be there, you're then able to delete them from that registration so that they're not able to join. Another really cool feature is being able to mute participants upon entry. And so this is really great that if someone is performing, or maybe there's a specific discussion and everyone's taking turns, this way everyone's muted when they first arrive, and so you're not hearing everyone in their background noise, and then they're able to unmute themselves when it's their turn, or when they would like to share something. So Zoom does allow recording. So similar to how we're recording today's session, you can also record meetings and live stream them. So you do have the option of live streaming to Facebook and YouTube. You do have to be the host in order to do this. So if you are planning on live streaming, making sure that you do have access to the YouTube and that you do have access to Facebook in order to be able to stream the meeting. You also can record it via the cloud or locally. And so by saving it to the cloud, it saves it to your Zoom account so you can access the recording anywhere and then share it out. You can also set it up to where if you're saving it to the cloud that everyone that was in the meeting automatically gets sent the recording, or you can also set it up locally and have it saved to your computer. And the really cool thing about that is when you're done with the meeting, it saves not only the video, but then also saves the transcript of the chat, saves just the audio. So if for some reason you just need the audio clippings to make another video, or you want to be able to use it in the future, it saves that in addition to the actual full-on recording with audio and that video. And then you can also share, or we also encourage that you share with folks if you are recording. So add that to your advertisement if there's the option of watching it afterwards, and just make sure people know that they're going to be recorded so that if they don't want to be seen, they can mute their camera. And so here's a screenshot of what it looks like when you want to go live. And so if you see along the bottom, there is the option of more. And so when you click on more, it gives you the option to go live on Facebook, YouTube, or Workplace on Facebook. And so you would then just click live on Facebook and it reroutes you to Facebook, where you can choose if you're putting it on your personal account, if you're going to be putting it on a page that you manage, or if you want to live stream it within a group. Unfortunately, Zoom does not allow you to screen share your actual Zoom screen, so I can't show you that in live time. But if you click on more and then click on live on Facebook, it's really, really easy. It takes you straight to Facebook and essentially just lets you add in the description, and then you click live and it starts streaming. And so now we're going to walk through real quickly the actual Zoom website. And so I'm going to stop sharing and then switch screens. And so this here is the Zoom procedures guide that the SGA Senate created last year. And so as you can see, they included the actual Zoom link. And then they also just included information about how to set up a Zoom account, how people could join the meeting, so including the URL, and then also explain what the waiting room was and how folks could raise their hand. Granted, not every organization uses such formal procedure, but adapting something like this could be really helpful for members as they learn to navigate Zoom, especially if they've only used it for class and are just tuning in to watch. And then the Zoom website, once again, is uga.zoom.us. And so from here, you can join a meeting if you've been invited to one, and if you know the meeting ID, you can start hosting a meeting, or you can sign into your account. And so you'll be asked to sign in with your My ID. And once you're signed in, you'll be taken to your profile. And so this will once again show you that it is through UGA. And then you can set your time zone. And then under meetings, it shows you all of your scheduled meetings. So if you've created a meeting, and so that's an easy way to start them or delete them. And then under recordings, it will show you any meetings that you've recorded. So if you did choose cloud recordings, it will show up here. And so this way you can download it, you can share it, or you can rewatch it. And then under settings is where you can change up what features are within each of your Zoom meetings. And so it's really easy. It kind of goes step by step through security, scheduling the meeting, and then the in-meeting features. And so here, if you put this on, this is how you enable the waiting room. You can also customize the waiting room. So if you want to include a message, so this is really like the automated message, the please wait, the meeting host will let you in soon, but you can also add a logo and you can add whatever description you'd like. And that's what shows up to folks when they join your link before you let them in. Here's when you can enable the passcode and whether or not you want to require a passcode. You can also choose whose video is on. So here, you can have it set where the host's video automatically turns on, or if participants' videos will automatically be on. And so obviously the host and participants can then turn their video off. But if for whatever reason y'all had agreed on that, you can have it enabled. You can also choose how folks can join in audio-wise, so whether or not it's just through the computer, if they have to use a phone. So this is really helpful if you're doing phone calls and don't necessarily want to use your personal number. You can have folks join a Zoom meeting by calling in. And this way you're able to chat through a Zoom phone call, but without having to have video on as well. You can enable join before host. So this is if you want folks to be able to join the Zoom meeting before you're on. There's also a personal meeting ID. So everyone through Zoom is given a meeting ID. And so this is kind of like your personal office via Zoom. And so by sending this out, it brings people to your personal meeting. And so that's if you just want to have a quick chat, you don't need a formalized meeting. You can send someone that so that they join you on Zoom through your personal meeting. And everyone's assigned a different digit number for that. I find that really helpful for just one-on-one conversations or a quick chat if we don't necessarily want to have to call and we want to be able to see each other. Oftentimes we'll just send out my personal meeting ID. You can mute participants upon entry, as we discussed earlier. So this way you're not hearing background noise or having the complications of having to remind everyone to mute themselves. And they can always unmute themselves at any point during the meeting. Under in-meeting basics, here is where you can kind of determine what the chat looks like. And so you have the option of turning on or off the chat. You can also choose whether or not individuals can send private messages through the Zoom chat. And then you can also choose whether or not you want to auto-save the chat. And then oftentimes when you leave a Zoom meeting, it takes you to this feedback form in which you can provide feedback to Zoom directly. And so you can determine whether or not you want that to be an option. And so if you'd rather not have that brought up for participants, you can turn that off. You can also determine if you're going to allow co-hosts and polling, and then what controls end up showing up for participants when they join. I have found it really helpful to go in and turn on the things that I feel I'll be using the most. So having the automatic mute, and then also having videos off. Those are some of the things that I have. And so I don't have to change that for every meeting. It's just now that any meeting I create, these settings are automatically used for that meeting. You can also choose who can screen share. So it can be just you as the host or any participant. For the annotation, here you can choose whether or not that's allowed. Just make sure that you test it out beforehand so you don't make the same mistake that I did today. Nonverbal feedback and meeting reactions. So this is whether or not you want to allow them to give you a thumbs up, an applause, being able to say yes or no to things. Here's where you can turn that on or off. And then allowed removed participants to rejoin. This will allow that if you kick someone out, you can determine whether or not they can rejoin by clicking on the link again. So if you are having something that you're live streaming, or maybe it's a speaker coming to join and you don't necessarily want to have to deal with people joining and coming and going, by turning this on or off will kind of allow you to control whether or not someone can join more than once if you have to remove them for whatever reason. You can determine whether or not people can rename themselves and whether or not profile pictures are shown. I definitely encourage to keep on the renaming themselves just in case folks do want to change their name, since it will automatically go with their full legal name. For in-meeting advanced, this is where you can set up breakout rooms. And so I always just keep this on just in case for whatever reason I need to use them. You can determine different captioning options. And then if you do want to allow participants to use virtual background, here's where you would want to turn that on or off. And then it goes into some more specific settings. These are some of the things that I don't ever really need to use and haven't had to use, but I do want to point out the allow live streaming meetings. Make sure you have this turned on if you are planning to record and want to live stream the meeting on Facebook or YouTube. You can also set up email notifications. So these are really helpful if you are recording and want to be notified when your cloud recording's done. You can also have it set up that if someone joins the Zoom before you are in, it will email you, or if a meeting is canceled. And so these are just kind of up to personal preference of what you prefer. As you can see, I have most of them on. And then it goes into other. These aren't really anything that we would use or that most student organizations would use, but if someone does need to schedule meetings on behalf of someone else, it does go into that here. So those are some of the more basic Zoom features and where you can find them all. What I've learned is just kind of practicing and seeing what works, and then figuring out which of these settings that you feel your student organization or that you personally will need to use most, and just keeping them on and adjusting them for the individual meeting if necessary.
Jackie, we've got a couple of questions that I'll throw out to you. Joshua asked, if you create a meeting and you select the mute participants upon entry feature, what happens when they try and unmute themselves? Do they have control to do so, or can they unmute themselves whenever they want?
Yes, so if you choose the mute upon entry option, participants can unmute themselves whenever they'd like. There is an option within settings where you can set it to where individuals cannot unmute themselves. And so if you do not want to give control to participants, that is one option. So an example of how I've seen an organization use that is last spring when SGA was having their inauguration. Since that was being live streamed and lots of individuals are going to be watching, and there were 50 plus people on this call, they did have it to where individuals couldn't unmute themselves, just to make sure that there was no accidental background noise during the inaugural speech. And so that is something that you can choose to turn on or off. But if you're just putting the mute participants upon entry, they will be able to unmute themselves.
And additionally, too, if you, as the host, you can actually mute and unmute people as well. And so if anyone accidentally hops on the call and they haven't muted themselves and you can kind of hear some background noise, you can quickly mute them and then they'll be able to unmute themselves when they're ready to speak. One other question we have from Elise, she asked for polling. Can you create poll questions before the meeting like ahead of time?
That is a really great question. I personally have not used polling. It's not something that I've done, but I do believe that when you go through the settings, it does provide more instructions that you can, or you can have them set up kind of like on a document and then copy and paste them over. Since when you click polling, it gives you the option to add a question. So like right now, it's giving me the option to add as many questions as I'd like, and then you click launch poll. So that's definitely something that I would need to look more into to give you a definitive answer, but I do believe you can. And I see that Joshua has asked, can you send people to specific breakout rooms during the meeting with specific other people, or does that only work through a previous registration? Yes, you can set up breakout rooms beforehand, and you can also do it randomly or however you'd like during the meeting. So when you do enable that feature via Zoom, it gives you the option to allow breakout rooms to be set up before the meeting. Or you can do it during the actual meeting and move people manually, or there's the option to do it randomly as well if you just want people to mingle with other folks that they may not have already had the chance to connect with.
Another question we got, Jackie, from Molly, is she asked if will everyone in the meeting have to be using their UGA Zoom account / UGA single sign-on for all the features to work, for example, the 300 person limit and unlimited time, or just the host?
Just the host. So in order to have these features, it just needs to be the person creating the meeting. Folks don't technically have to have a Zoom account to join. So they could just click on the link and then download Zoom on their computer, but they can be accessing it even if they're not a UGA member. Although with your student organization, everyone should have their UGA account, but they don't necessarily have to be logged in order to join.
One other interesting piece that might be helpful for some of our chief officers or advisors on the call, if you're tracking attendance for your meetings, you can have folks pre-register for the meeting. That way you're collecting attendance information prior to, so they've confirmed that they're going to be there. And then as they kind of hop in the call, you can start to kind of check them off. But that might be really helpful to help track attendance for either virtual style events or meetings for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Are there additional questions? Chelsea asked, is the pre-register feature in the settings for the call?
Yes. So when you go ahead and create the meeting on Zoom, so when you go to schedule a new meeting, it gives you the option of whether or not you want to require registration. And so from my experience, it's either you require it, so that folks need to fill out the form similar to what you all did to join us today, and that sends them an email. I haven't quite figured out how you can have some folks submit information and then others not. I believe it's either everyone has to register and you require it, or it's just send out the link and anyone can join. But that's also where, for security reasons, if you're wanting to ensure that random individuals aren't coming in, but you don't want to have registration, you could create a meeting and then have a passcode so only those with a passcode can join, which I know is a little bit of a tangent from your question, but helpful information to have.
I'm getting ready to also, and we'll add these for the folks who weren't able to watch in person. We'll add these links, but the two links I just added to the chat box are EITS's information on, and perfect. So Jackie's even thrown this on the additional resources slide. I'm stealing your thunder, Jackie. I'm sorry. But what I just threw in the chat box are some of the help guides from EITS regarding Zoom. And obviously, a lot of the things that Jackie and I have learned as we did this late last spring semester when we were kind of thrown into the Zoom world and had to figure out how to use it. We just watched a lot of YouTube videos and Googled how to do a lot of the different things until some of these resources were available. And so if all else fails, either pick up the phone and call us and we'll help you find the answer. Or feel free to also just Google it, because here's the thing. Institutions across the country are trying to all figure out how to use Zoom. And so we've learned a lot from our peers at other schools. We certainly learn new things from organizations every day on how they're using it to be more effective and efficient.
Yes. And so along with the links that Taylor sent, Zoom does have some 1-minute video tutorials that are incredibly helpful. So if you're like me and would rather see it instead of reading it or hearing it, this is a great way for them to show you on almost all of their features. They go step by step in very short videos. We also encourage you to get creative. So recognizing that not everyone wants to sit on Zoom for hours on end, especially after having class. So get creative about what programs and events you're having, what meetings look like, ways for individuals to still engage with one another. And if you want to chat through any ideas, feel free to reach out to us in ELS. And we'll also provide opportunities for organization leaders to come together, similar to a roundtable, to share ideas and things that they have found to work. Once again, we just want to remind everyone of the student involvement listserv that's sent out. So if you want to continue receiving different resources, or if you want to share out announcements of your own, here is the link to opt in. And then on the Involvement Network front page, you can submit an announcement request if there's anything you want to share out with folks in this weekly email that's sent out by our office. And then we're going to be continuing these Zoom series. So if there's any other topics or ideas that you have, things that you feel would be helpful for us to go over, or find campus partners to share more information out about, please email those to us. Our email is ugaels@uga.edu. And then, as always, the recordings will be posted to our YouTube. So feel free to re-reference them. Or if you can't make a future session, you can find the recordings on there.
Jackie,
if anyone has any other questions?
We actually have one more question. Joshua asked, our group wants to start the call as a large group with a presentation and then split off into individual breakout groups. All the breakout groups will have one officer and then multiple general members. And so if the officer wants to present their screen and control the breakout rooms, do all the officers then have to be established co-host or / additional host in order for them to be able to share their screens and be able to control the mute and unmute option for the members that'll be in their individual breakout sessions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you have a few different options. If they are co-hosts, then they obviously will have all of the same like privileges that you have, so they'll be able to control everything. But if you don't want to have to add everyone as co-hosts, you do have the option to allow anyone to screen share. So if when you're creating the meeting, if you set it up to where screen sharing is allowed, and then you have that additional question where it says only hosts or everyone, if you click everyone, then anyone that's put in those breakout rooms could share. But then you could also just ask people politely not to be sharing their screen. And I think the interesting thing is most people honestly don't know how, especially if they're not the ones leading. Like, this might be their first time attending an organization meeting via Zoom. And so hopefully it isn't something that they're trying, but in all meetings that I've been in, that necessarily hasn't been an issue yet. So you could add them as a co-host if your settings are set to where not everyone can screen share. But if your settings are set where anyone can, then they don't need to be added as co-hosts or alternative hosts. It's really whatever works best for y'all.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for the questions. Are there any last questions before we kind of wrap this up and let y'all get out of here? All right, one slightly off topic, she admits, but can we explain how the involvement fair online will work logistically? We'd be happy to.
Yes, that's a great question. So we sent out some additional information today in terms of signing up for the involvement fair. I have received quite a few emails from student organizations saying the involvement network is not allowing them to register. It's giving them an access denied error message. If you have received that, no worries. We've reached out to Campus Labs, who runs the system that we use for the involvement network, and are working on fixing that. But the involvement network, organizations can sign up. And so from 7 to 10 on September 3rd, it will be a digital fair. So organizations that register, their organizations will show up so they can be searched. They'll be shown to students when they sign in to the involvement network, and then they can read the description. And then we're asking organizations to provide a link. So a Zoom link or a GroupMe link, whatever it is that you want to use to communicate. And then that will allow participants to click on it and then join a digital meet and greet room that your organization is hosting. So each organization individually will have their own meet and greet so that folks can join them and talk to them, ask questions, meet members, and learn how to get involved. But that's all housed in essentially in a big search directory through the involvement network. So when you register, you'll be asked to provide a description and then provide your link. And that description allows students to then search based on keywords in order to find your organization so that they're not having to search through all organizations, but rather those that have opted to participate in the involvement fair.
Absolutely. And we're trying to make sure we know it's not the same as doing it in person, but we're trying to replicate that experience as much as we can for not only the attendees, but also for all the student organization leaders. So we encourage you to get creative. Essentially, your tabling location is now essentially a mini breakout room where folks can come and go and ask questions. You can present information just like you would have on your trifold board, on your table. You could do fun games and giveaways that could work out where someone picks that item up later if you're giving things away. So we encourage you to get creative and use that UGA innovative spirit. But we think this is going to be as close as we can to replicating that experience. But unfortunately, given the fact that we've had thousands of attendees the last 2 years, we knew we wanted to prioritize folks' safety and well-being. And so we knew the virtual option was going to be the best bet. One additional piece of information regarding involvement fairs that might be helpful for folks to just know. Additionally, throughout the rest of this fall semester, as always, we will still host many involvement fairs that will also be done virtually, but our hope is that we can facilitate that and a little bit more of a close-knit community, even if it has to be online, but there's still going to be opportunities for folks to get their information out about their organizations. So if you have follow-up questions, we'd be happy to answer them, and just feel free to reach out to us via email or by phone. And I'll throw our phone number in the chat box as well so folks have it.
And some future Zoom series sessions are going to be about how to manage the involvement fair. So some different ideas for how to manage those breakout rooms, since we've already heard of different organizations coming up with different ways. Some very formal of having 30-minute increments that they want folks to join in if they're giving a presentation, or more informal if they're going to just split people into breakout rooms. So it's whatever your organization feels will be best to share what y'all do and how people can get involved. And for the folks that are watching the recording afterwards, our phone number is 706-542-6396. Just wanted to share that out there too. So thank you all for joining. As always, if you have any other questions, feel free to email us at ugaels@uga.edu. I'm going to be stopping the recording, but if you have any additional questions or just want to chat one-on-one, I will remain on for just a few minutes. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.